Good day, people. This is EA Lego Academy. My name is Eliaza, and we are continuing our Python tutorial series. All right, so today we are going to be looking at dictionaries and we're going to be explaining what they are all about. All right, so before we continue, uh, I want you to please like my video. As you watch this video and as you discover if it's something that is informative to you, please like, and I want you to share it. If you feel it might be of use to someone else, please share the video and please subscribe. All right, so without further ado, let's start. So we're going to start with the definition of dictionaries. So the definition. So these are data structures that allow us to store or save elements as key value pairs. So what this means is that we are going to have two elements of any data type separated by a colon representing a single value. We can see this below. So dictionaries, they are similar to lists and tuples, which we have treated in our previous videos. But the difference between dictionaries and lists and tuples is that a dictionary allows us to store a single element as a key and value pair. So we have two elements stored as pairs and they are separated with a colon. So that's the definition of a dictionary. So below we have an example represented. So you can see that I created a dictionary called dictinfo, and this dictionary has four key value pairs as elements. So it has four key value pairs as elements. All right, so I will be explaining something before I continue. So we know that variables are empty containers that can be assigned a value. So you can see that here this dictinfo is a variable that can be assigned a value. Now the value I'm assigning to this variable is, it starts with a curly bracket and it ends with it starts with a curly bracket opening and a curly bracket ending. Now this is us implicitly representing the dictionary class. So the dictionary is actually an inbuilt class in Python. And when we create a variable and we assign a curly bracket, both the opening and the closing of a curly bracket, we can say that that curly bracket represents the dictionary class that is inbuilt in Python. But for the fact that we're not writing it by its name, we can say that we are implicitly representing that dictionary class. So I hope that makes sense. So the fact that I'm using a curly bracket and within this curly bracket I have key value pairs as elements, I can say that this my variable called dictinfo is now an implicit representation of the dictionary class. I hope that makes sense. All right, so what I will do, you open up your Python, you create a file, a dictionary file. So what I would do, I would delete this and write it again. I did it in a previous video, but I did not upload that video, so I deleted it. So I'm redoing the video again. So this is what that's the file you are seeing right here. So I would have to delete it so that I can start all over. Okay, so we are familiar with how we can create Python files. You open up your PyCharm. I'm sure that I don't need to go over that again. You open up your PyCharm, you come to the folder after you have created your project, the folder name, the project name, you come here and you right click. Then the very first option you see that says new, you come here down to Python file, you click on it, you give your Python file a name, and then voila, you can start. So I would call it dictionaries. Press enter. So we are going to create a dictionary from scratch. So I will call the dictionary info. information. You can give it any name since it's a variable. Now, in my notes, you will discover that for each key value pair I was entering, you can see name is a key, Alex is the value of that key, course is another key, physics is the value of that key, age is another key, 37 is the value of that key, school is another key, Oxford is the value of that key as well. But you notice that I after each key value pair, there was a comma, and then instead of me writing the next key value pair on that same line, I went to a new line and I wrote another key value pair. So what I'm trying to say is this: you don't need to do this. I just did this so that my code can be readable, can be clear and readable. So you can decide to write them on a straight line and Python would still give you the result you are looking for. So Python would not give you an error if you decided to write all your key value pairs on one straight line. But for readability purposes, it's advised you take each key value pair to a new line. Like I said, it's all your choice. Doesn't really matter. So I'm going to create a dictionary that has 4 key value pairs. Now, the first key would be name, and then the value would be James. The next key would be score, and then the value would be 87. The next key would be school, and the value would be Oxford. Now I can do it like this if I wanted to, but for the sake of readability and consistency, I will just take them to a new line so that you would understand what I'm talking about. So I'll just do it like this. So you can see that here we have our dictionary. But one thing Python does is that even though I took each new key value pair to the next line, when Python is printing out the result, it will print it out on a straight line. So now, in order for you to run this code, like I said when we started the course, you click on this drop down and you change it to current file. Then you click play. Now this would display the result. So you see that irrespective of the fact that you took each key value pair to the next line, Python printed them out on a straight line. You can see that everything is on a straight line. So yeah, that's it. All right, so let's look at accessing values in a dictionary. So how do we access values in a dictionary? So we said we can only access values of keys, but not keys themselves. So we can only access key elements in a dictionary by looping through that dictionary. So what this simply means is that if you are trying to access an element in a dictionary directly without you using a loop whatsoever, be it a for loop or a while loop, if you are trying to access an element, the only element you can access is the value of a key. That's what we're trying to say. You can only access the value of a key directly. If you are trying to access a key, you would have to loop through that dictionary using a for loop. So that's what this is trying to say. Now, in order for us to access the value of a key, we're going to target the name of that key so that we can get access to its value. So in order to access the value of a key, you're going to target the name of the key so that you can have access to the value of that key. All right, so you come back to your PyCharm. So since I would still be working with the same dictionary, I don't want to create so many dictionaries that might cause problems at the end of the day. I will just maintain this dictionary I created already. So you copy it and then you can comment out this previous one that you wrote, comment it out, come down here. So you can say accessing, you can give it a title. So accessing elements values in a dictionary. In a dictionary. All right, so I'll paste this. Now I can, okay. So you can just come here. So if I want to access James from this dictionary, how do I do that? You say information, in square brackets, you write the name of the key whose value you are trying to access. Now you will discover that this would print out James to the screen. So you see we get James. Now you can even use it to make a sentence. So I will explain something before we continue. So now, if I was to make a sentence with this name as an example, I will use a single quote. I would explain to you the reason why. So I can come here and say hello there, and you say open your curly bracket as usual. I'm sure we can remember the F string that allows us to read the value of a variable. Now, in this case, the value of the variable we are trying to read is James. The variable name is information name. So targeting the value of that key, the value of that key becomes the value, while this information name becomes the variable who holds that value. I'm sure that makes sense. So if you can remember from when we created variables and assigned them a value, we can take, for example, that this information and name is a variable, while James is the value of this variable. So applying that here to the F string, you will discover that if I pass information here, square bracket, name, it would allow us to read the value of that variable, which is hello there, James. I hope that makes sense. Since we know that in order for us to access the value of a key, we have to write the name of that dictionary. Then in square brackets, we have to write the name of the key whose value we are trying to access. So automatically, this is the same thing as a variable whose value you are trying to print out. If you go back to the previous um, tutorials we did when we looked at variables and simple data types, you will be able to relate to what I'm saying. This information with name is the same thing as a variable, and its value is this James here. So that's what we are doing. Now back to what I was trying to explain to you. Now the reason why I'm using a single quote here is because the name of the key has a double quote. Now in Python, you cannot mix a single quote and a single quote in the same sentence. You cannot mix a single quote and a single quote in the same sentence. You will get an error. So let me explain that properly. If I decided to change this name to a single quote as an example, you will see I get an underline. And if you further investigate to check the error, because one thing about IDEs, they tell you your error. They point your errors out to you so you can inspect them further and see the explanation as to why you are getting an error. Now, this tells me that the Python version 3.9 does not allow nesting of string literals with the same quote type inside F strings. So it doesn't allow us to use a single quote if I'm starting with a single quote. But if I was starting with a double quote like this and I closed it with a double quote, you will discover that it will have no problem. So you have to choose one. If you are starting your sentence with a double quote, then you know that you are going to use a single quote within that sentence. And if you are starting your sentence with a single quote, then you know you are going to use a double quote within that sentence. I hope that makes a lot of sense. So you come here, you press play, and then you get your result. All right, so moving on. So what you are going to do, just comment this out, or you can comment out the entire thing. So, but I will still be using the same dictionary, so I'm not changing it for consistency's sake. All right, so the next thing is okay, we have done that, accessing values in a dictionary. Now we want to look at adding new key value pairs. So we said we can add new key value pairs by writing the name of the dictionary and putting the name of the key in square brackets and then assigning it a value. So it's just the same thing. Okay, no, all right, we have not looked at that yet. So the way it's done is that you write the name of your dictionary, then beside the name of the dictionary, you open a square bracket, just similar to the same way you try to access the value of a key. You open a square bracket, and then within the square bracket, you write the name of the new key that you are trying to add to that dictionary, and then you assign a value to it using the assignment operator. So I'm sure we all know that this is called the assignment operator. This is not equal to, it is the assignment operator. I already explained this, the difference between an equal to and an assignment operator when we looked at conditional statements. So if you can't remember, go to my previous tutorials where I talked about conditional statements, and you would see that I explicitly explained this. So now this allows me to add a new key to this dictionary called score, and then give a value to that key of 88. So you discover that when I run this dictionary, it would have added a new key called score and the value of that key as 88. So we are writing ours. We are writing ours. We are not copying and pasting code. So I'm trying to teach you how you can be able to write code from scratch. We're not copying this, but this is just an explanation to what I'm trying to tell you, or a description rather, a visual representation or description as to the definition I'm trying to explain to you. So you come back here with that same dictionary that we had, information. Remember, we have been using it already. That's what we are using. I want to add a new key value pair. So you come here, you say information, open a square bracket, and then you write score. Now, I would not use score. I'll use course. Course, I want to um, add a new key value pair, and I will give it a value of physics. Now you will discover that if I should print out this dictionary, to print out my dictionary, but you will discover that after school and Oxford, we have a new key value pair called course and physics. So if you run your code, you're going to have that. So you see we have course and physics. Now you will notice that although I use double quotes to write my key and value pairs, Python prints it out as a single quote. It's simply because Python does not discriminate between the single quotes and the double quotes. It sees them as one and the same string values, unlike some other programming languages that do not allow this, specifically low level programming languages, or programming languages that have the ability to low level. So I would explain that when I start my Java tutorial series, but we have to finish this first of all, a step at a time. So that's the reason why Python has it in a single quote. All right, so um, this one was adding new key value pairs. So you want to give a title to each topic we are dealing with. Adding new key value pairs. So when you are done with that, you want to comment it out. Okay. Now the next thing we want to look at is starting with an empty dictionary. So you can start with an empty dictionary and add key value pairs to it. So it is just similar to adding a new key value pair to a dictionary that already has elements. But this time around, we are adding new key value pairs to an empty dictionary. So I will come here and create an empty dictionary. I will create an empty dictionary. I'll call it um, data empty. The data empty equal to an empty curly bracket. Now, for me to start adding new key value pairs to this dictionary, for me to start adding new key value pairs to the dictionary, to come here and say data empty. So I want to add some key value pairs. I will just say course equal to biology. I'll come here and say data empty department science data empty CGPA maybe 4.57. The data empty and say I don't know, it be name. So name Richard. So now you can now come here and print out your dictionary. So your dictionary that was previously empty before, you will discover that it will now have all these key value pairs added to it. You can see that it was empty before, then after you added these four key value pairs, it now had these as its elements. All right. So the next thing, that's how you start with a dictionary. So let's look at modifying values in a dictionary. So this is when we target an already existing key in a dictionary and assign it a new value. It can be demonstrated in the code below. All right. So this code, there's a small error in this my code. The proper, I'll explain it anyway to you when we write code in PyCharm. So disregard this explanation, it's not correct. So the topic is modifying values in a dictionary. So I'll just minimize that. You come here, comment this one out. So starting with an empty dictionary, give it a title first. And okay, next one is modifying what? Modifying values in a dictionary. So you can write that down. So modifying values in a dictionary. So we're still using that our dictionary of before information. Now, maybe I'm trying to change the score of this person to, let's say, 91 as an example. You come here and you just target the name of the dictionary information, and then you target key whose value you are trying to change, target score, and I will assign it to like 81. Now you will discover that if I print out the dictionary again, you will discover that it would have changed 87 to 91, which is straightforward as that. If you print out the result, you will see that we have 91 as the value of the key called score. I hope that makes sense. So if it doesn't make any sense, ask me questions in the comment section and I will respond to you. Sensible questions, please. Sensible questions. All right, so minimize then. So let's look at removing key value pairs from a dictionary. So we said this is when we use the del statement to target a key in a dictionary, removing its key and value. So like again, the code here is not correct. I would rewrite it again and explain properly. So this is when we use the del statement to target a key in a dictionary, removing its key and value. So the del statement that we looked at when we were looking at the list data structure, we can also use that statement here. If you can remember, I said a statement is a function without a parenthesis. We are still going to look at functions properly, but functions, from what I said when we started this tutorial series, they are containers that allow us to hold multiple lines of code written in order to execute a program. So normally the normal convention is that functions have parentheses at their front, but when you see a line of code or a code that executes an operation but doesn't have a parenthesis, it's a function, but we refer to it as a statement. So the del allows us to remove key value pairs from a dictionary. So since it doesn't have a parenthesis at the front, we refer to it as a statement, but we know that it's a function. I hope that makes sense. All right, so we're going to create a dictionary. All right, we're going to continue from the dictionary we had before. So the topic is removing key value pairs. So removing key value pairs. So I'll just paste that. All right, so maybe I'm trying to remove name James. So you just come here and say del, give a space, information, and you target the person's name. That is, you target the key. Now, because they are written in pairs, you cannot remove one without removing the other. So since I've targeted the key, we know that when we target the key, we are trying to access the value. So we can say that this del statement is removing the value of that key, James. But because they go hand in hand, they are pairs, once you remove the value of that key, the key itself would also be removed. So when you print this out, you will discover that you are left with score 87 school Oxford. So information, you will discover that you are left with just only two key value pairs. So that is how you remove key value pairs from a dictionary. So I'll be sending the assignment for my previous tutorial, the conditional statements. I haven't really had enough time because of my work, so but I'll squeeze out time and I'll send the assignments and classworks, the exercises, so that you can prepare. You can rather practice and get better. That is to be a better programmer. So I'll send it. Well, let's finish this first of all. All right. So the next one is using get to access unavailable values. So this is when we use the get function to print out a sentence to the screen when we try to access a key that doesn't exist in a dictionary. Now, this get function allows us to write a sentence that we want to print out when we are trying to access a key that is not in existence. But however, if that key is in existence, this get function would redirect us back to that dictionary, printing out the value of that key since it would be in existence. So I'll take that again. So it allows us to print out a sentence, the get function, if we are trying to access a key's value that is not in existence. But if that key is in existence, the get function would redirect us back to that key, printing out the value of that key. All right, so we're going to do it practically so that you can understand better. So using the get to access unavailable values. So using the get function to access unavailable values. So I'm going to paste that same dictionary here and I'll create a variable. I'll just say results and I'll equate it. So now the get function is a function inside the dictionary class. So since we know that information is an implicit representation of the dictionary class, we know that information also has access to all the functions inside the dictionary class. We looked at in our last class that when we looked at the list class, and I told you that we have append, we have pop, we have insert, we have del inside the list class. But because when we create a variable and we assign a square bracket as its value, it also means that that variable who we are assigning a square bracket to as its value now represents the list class. So now that variable who we are assigned a square bracket to as its value can access the append, the insert, the pop, the del. So likewise to information, since it's an implicit representation of the dictionary class, and we said that the dictionary class has the get function, information too has the ability to access the get function. So classes are just like containers that can hold multiple functions and lines of code as well. But functions are also containers as well that can hold code. But classes are bigger containers that can hold multiple functions, and inside this function we can have code in them, and classes too can also decide to hold code without putting that code in a function. All this will get clear to you when we look at object-oriented programming. All right, so since information is now a representation of my dictionary class, I can access the get function from it. So get. So maybe I'm trying to access a key that is not in existence, maybe age. I will now pass a sentence here. Age does not exist. Then you come here and say print result. So if you print result, it will print out age does not exist. So from my definition, this is what I want to print out if it tries to access a key that is not in existence. So that is what to print out when I try to access a key that does not exist. All right, so if I should run this code, you will discover that it will print out age does not exist. But however, if I decide to come here and create the age key and give it a value, what would be printed out? Now, if I should run this code, it's going to come here and print out 32 instead. And you see we get 32. So that was the definition I was trying to explain to you. So if a key does not exist, when we are trying to access it, it's going to print out a sentence that we would provide for Python to print out. But if that key is in existence, instead of Python printing out that sentence, it would redirect you back to the dictionary, printing out the value of that key. I hope that makes a lot of sense. If it doesn't, ask me questions in the comment section and I would respond to the best of my ability. All right, so the next thing we want to look at here is looping through a dictionary's key value pair. So we want to see how we can loop through uh, the key value pair of a dictionary. So we know what a loop does. We know that it allows us to repeat the execution of a program some certain number of times. And when we look at the for loop, we said the for loop allows us to execute a program over and over until we get to the last element inside a data structure. Then we said for a while loop, a while loop allows us to repeat a program until we supply a condition that allows that while loop to stop. So for a while loop, we might not know when that is the stop. The ability for the while loop to stop is not known most times. Or although you can also predict when you want your while loop to stop, you can determine the exact number of times you want your while loop to run. But for the most part, we don't always specify how many times we want the while loop to run. It can run infinitely. It can run for some infinite number of times. But for a for loop, you know exactly when it's going to stop. So that's the difference. That's just the difference. But some programming languages don't work like that. Specifically low level programming languages, they do it in such a way that for both the for loop and the while loop, you cannot know when they are going to stop. You have to specify when you want both of them to stop. So you can decide to allow your for loop to run infinitely as well, and you can also allow your while loop to run infinitely in other programming languages that are low level. But for Python, the definition is different. For a for loop, you know when it's going to stop, but for a while loop you don't know. So that's just the basic definition, although it is way more intricate than this, and I'll be explaining as you get proficient in your skills. You will get to understand these terms better. All right, so now we know that the dictionary is a class, the list is a class, the tuple is a class, and when we create a variable that is an implicit representation of these classes, those variables we create, they also have access to the functions contained within this class. Now, I already explained to you that the dictionary class has a function called get, which we saw how we could use by creating a representation of that class implicitly. So now also here, I created another dictionary as well. Before we talk about that, the dictionary class has some other functions apart from the get function. It has a function called keys, it has a function called values, and it has another function called items. So we are going to be starting with the items function. Now the items function allows us to gain access to both a key and a value pair at the same time. So if we are going to loop through a dictionary and we are trying to access the key and the value, we are going to create two variables. Specifically when we are using the for loop, we are going to create two variables that represent both the key and the value within that dictionary, depending on the iteration we are currently at. Now, I explained to you that an iteration is a single execution of a program within a loop. So for the first iteration, when I create those two variables would represent the very first key and the very first value. Then for the second iteration, those two variables would represent the second key and the second value, like that till we get to the last element in that data structure. I hope that makes sense. So, but because in this case, the dict loop here is an implicit representation of my dictionary class, you can see my curly bracket, implicit representation. This variable name called dict loop also has the ability to access those functions I mentioned, like the items, the keys, and the value. So you can see that here I said for k comma v in dict loop dot items, and we know that these items is giving me the ability to access the key and the value. That's why you can see I created two variables here representing the key and value for each iteration. So let's get started. So you come back here to your PyCharm, and then we're still working with that same dictionary. So I want to loop through this dictionary, printing out the key and the value for each iteration. I'll just create a for loop. Now you can create any variable you want, any name, provided it does not start with a number. It can start with an underscore and there is no white space separating that variable. So I can write k1 comma v1 in information. Now I will come here and say dot items. So this gives me the ability to access key and value pair for every iteration. Now I can come here and say print, use an f string and write a sentence key, say the key is, and you just specify k1. And you can also come here and say print using an f string as well, the value is v1. Now to make this better, to make this more professional, you can create a conditional statement that allows you to specify which iteration you are at, so that it can tell you whether you are at the first iteration, second iteration, or third iteration. So what I would do, you can just delete this or comment it out in case you still want to make use of it. I'll just comment it out within the for loop. Now I'll come here and I would write something. Now you come here and say if. Now I will create a conditional statement. I'll say if v1 is equivalent to information at name. So what am I simply doing here? I'm checking if for that iteration, if the value of that key is equal to the first element, that is the first value of the first key. We know that normally if I'm trying to access the value of a key, I would write the name of the dictionary and then put the name of the key in square brackets. So this is the same thing as me accessing James. So what I'm trying to say is if v1 is equal to James, that's what I'm saying. So if v1 is equal to James, I'll come here and say print first iteration. Then you can come here and say value is print using an, so you can even use format method here. You can say value is, open a curly bracket, use your format, and then you put your v1. So to substitute the value of v1 for that iteration, then you can come here and create another condition and say if v1 is equivalent to information, target the next element at the next iteration, which is score, and that is you target 87. And you come here and say print. So you can be creating a new line so that it will not be close together, or there might not be need for that. We'll get back to that later. You can come here and say second iteration. Then you can come here and say print. Then you can say value is dot format. And you say v1 because it will tell you the value of v1 for that iteration. So they will not print out the same thing. Remember what I told you for conditional statements, that the condition doesn't matter. It's whether the condition has to be either true or false. If it is true, then the program within would run. Now, in this case, for that iteration, if the value of v1 is the value of this key, it would print this out for you. So it's using the value of v1 for that specific iteration. So if it was the first iteration and this condition is true, it will print out the value of v1 for that iteration. If this condition was also true, it will print out the value of v1 for that iteration. So they won't print out the same thing because we have different conditions for the both of them. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, go back and check my conditional statement video. So I'll create another condition. v1 is equivalent to information at. We'll check the other value, which is school. So school. And you come here and say print third iteration. Third iteration. And you come here and say print value is format. v1. All right, so like I said, you can create a new line so that they won't be congested together. So you say print \n. You can also come here as well and do that for this. So print \n. So you discover that to print out different values for each iteration. So you can see that here, first iteration value is James, second iteration value is 87, third iteration value is Oxford. You can also decide to print out the key as well for that iteration. You can print out the key as well for that iteration. You can come here and add another condition. You can use the AND operator. Now, if you can remember in our truth table, if you can remember, we said if both conditions are true, it means that the result is going to be true. But if both conditions are not true, maybe one of them is false and the other is true, and we are using AND to compare both values, we're going to get false. So you have to make sure that both the condition on the left and on the right hand side are both true. So what I would do, I will say if v1 equal to information name and a1 is equivalent to name. So what I'm doing is that I'm checking if the key is name. You also come here and do the same thing as well. Say and a1 is equal to score. And then you come here and say and k1 is equivalent to school. So you can add that here. You can come here and say print key is dot format. Say k1. So it will only print out k1 for that iteration. They would not be the same k1. So I'll just copy it down, save myself the stress of typing it over and over again. Control V and then Control V. Now you discover that it will print out the key for the respective iteration, the key and value for the respective iteration. So you see we get first iteration, key is name, value is James. Then we have a new line. Second iteration, key is score, value is 87. Then a new line again. Then third iteration, key is school, value is Oxford. So I hope that makes a lot of sense to you. It doesn't, you have to go back to check the conditional statements tutorial again so that you can be able to understand what I'm doing here. So when you are done, having done all this, you want to comment it out. And I'm sure you know what's happening for each iteration. So for the first iteration, K1 and V1 was name and James. The conditional statement will check. Once it is covered, now because we have if, elif, no two conditions can be true at the same time. If this one is true, and even though the elif is also true, because Python saw the if condition to be true first, it would execute the code under there and start the for loop a second time. Now for the second iteration, if this one was true, because Python saw that one to be true first, because for the second iteration, this conditional statement, the if condition would not be true. So it will check for the elif. If it is true for the second iteration, it will execute this and then start again. So it keeps doing that till it gets to the last key value pair in the dictionary. This was something I explained when we looked at conditional statements and lists. If you can remember, conditional statements and lists, I talked about this specifically. So go back and watch my previous videos to understand. And if you are enjoying my tutorial so far, please like and subscribe and share. All right, so the next thing we are going to be looking at is, so I've looked at looping through all the key value pairs. So let's look at looping through all the keys. So now there is another function in the dictionary class called keys. And this function allows us to access only the keys, not the values in a dictionary. So unlike the items that allows us to access both key and value pairs, the keys function allows us to access only the keys. All right, so since we know that, you just paste your previous dictionary like you did before. Oh, I made just this one. Sorry, there was a mistake I did in commenting. So when you comment it out, you will notice that I previously commented out a code. Now you might see an error to show you a red line. So what you are going to do is to delete the previous quotation mark we made and delete it from here also so that you can remove your error. So for the very first for loop, when we carried out the for loop, you want to remove those triple quotation marks around the first two print sentences. All right. So looking at the keys function, it allows us to access the keys, not the values. So I'm still working with that same dictionary. Paste it. Sorry. Just copy it. Copy my dictionary. Come down here and paste. All right. So I'll create a for loop and I'll create just a variable, one variable, K1. So since I am working with only the keys, you only need to supply one variable in information dot keys. Now this would allow me to print out all the keys alone. You can decide to write a conditional statement to distinguish the iteration you are in if you want, but I'm not doing that because of time. So I'll say key and then I'll just pass it there. And I'll use dot format. You can also use your C style string if you want. And this will just print out all the keys in a stacked order. So for the first iteration, K1 is name, to print out key name. To start the iteration a second time, to start the for loop a second time. For the second iteration, K1 is score, to print out score. Start the for loop a third time. For the third iteration, K1 is school, to print out school. I'm sure that makes sense. So you print out your result. So you see you have everything printed out in that order: name, score, school. So that's how you access key value pairs. All right, so the next one is looping through all the keys in a particular order. So we said this is when we use the sorted and keys function to access only the keys in a dictionary in an ascending order. So I'm sure you can remember the sorted function that allows us to arrange elements in a list in an ascending order of any data type. So sorted works for both string values and numerical values. Now it works for keys alone, not values. So we want to see how we can rewrite the same code we wrote, but this time around, we're going to print out the keys in an ascending order. Now, if you look at this, my key here, it's already in an ascending order. So what I would do is that I would add, so before we add, just comment this one out, comment it out. Then you come down here and say, write a topic, looping through keys in a particular order. All right, so paste it. Now, because this is already arranged in an ascending order, I would add another key that would make it in a disorganized order. So I would say 30 as the value. Now I'll write my for loop for K2 in. So before you say information, you use your sorted function. You say information dot keys. So what's happening here is that now you will discover that when you print out K2, it's going to start with age, then followed by name, then followed by school, then followed by score. Now you might be wondering, why would it take school because before score? You might be wondering why it will take school before score. Now the reason is because when it sees that the very first two letters are the same, it checks the next letters. When it sees that the next letter are the same also, or the next letters are the same, it would now check the third letters. And when it sees that they are different, it will look for which one comes first in the alphabet. Now we can see that it is H that comes before O. So that's why it's going to use school instead of score. So when it is arranging this in an ascending order, you would see that it's going to start with age, followed by name, then school, then score. So you can come here and make a sentence with it. Come here and say key is format, and just say K2, and you see that to print it out in that order, starting with age. So we have name, key is age, key is name, key is school, key is score. So the iteration keeps starting all over and over and over again. Yeah. So that brings us to the end of this. Let's check. I think we have something. We have something. All right, sorry, we're not done. We still have one more function to look at. My bad. So we want to look at looping through all values. So looping through all values. So the definition goes like this. We said this is when we use a for loop with the values function to access only the values of a key in a dictionary. So we are only accessing the keys, the values of keys in a dictionary. We don't have any business with the keys themselves. We are just trying to access their values. So we have a function called values. So we have the items that allows us to access the key and value. We have the key function that allows us to access the keys alone. We have the values function that allows us to access the values alone. So all these functions are inside the dictionary class. But because we created a variable and we assigned it a curly bracket, making that variable an implicit representation of the dictionary class, that variable also has the ability to access those functions in the dictionary class. So you can just comment this out and paste it and then use values to see the result. So, so accessing values only. So you paste it and then you can carry out your for loop for the, just give it any name, doesn't matter. VA in information dot values. You can come here and say value is, so I will use C style string this time. So you have to practice the different types of string formatting so that you can get used to them. So value is, to print out, value is James. To start the iteration a second time, value is 87. Start the iteration a third time, value is Oxford. So you see that we have that. So value is James, value is 87, value is Oxford. So that's that. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial series. Now, if this video has been informative to you, please like. And if you feel like the video would also help someone else, please share. And if you want to get more content like this, and if you want to encourage me to create more content like this, please subscribe. So if you have made it this far to this video, thank you very much for your audience. Till our next video, have a very great day.